What's going on, Soul Tribe? I salute the divinity in you, and welcome to the Chariot Friends. Justin here, and we got a lot to talk about. We got some interesting things. I think that some interesting synchronicities that are coming up in the astrology. And when I find whenever spirit is being very obvious about some things, I think we really need to clue into the just to the signs here. This the moon's in Aquarius, and I think where our mind is at collectively is going to. I mean, it always matters, but I think that really is going to be something that's going to be crucial going forward as we continue to grow in this experience together here. So it's gonna be fantastic. But before we jump into that, if you're new here, again, my name is Justin. And know that when you're coming across this video, you're in sync with the moon, and who doesn't love that? But this is also a place for you if you happen to have Cancer in your placements, Sun, Moon, Rising. Oh, maybe Saturn, wherever. This one's for you, but we all have Cancer placements somewhere in your chart. You got a house that's got Cancer in it, so the moon's in charge of that one. And you got a moon placement, so it always pays to sync up with the moon. And that'll be easy because I do tarot card spreads based on that lovely luminary, the good old moon. And I talk about what sign it's in, what phase it's in, and when it's going to void a course, is all them lunar shenanigans, which is lucky we won't have to think about a void a course until December. So, ain't that nice? And just so you're all aware, this is a general reading, not a one-to-one. So take what fits into your story, discard the rest, and everything will be dope. Now, let's jump into it. Yeah, let's just jump into it because it's interesting. I'm gonna deviate a little bit. I'm not that too much. I'm just gonna add some things that I had been thinking about before, but I think this is gonna be very prevalent in today's one. But before we get into all the lunar shenanigans, depending on when you're watching this, happy Sunday. The sun is wild, right? The sun's associated with Sundays. And I think that one thing to think about with the sun, it is the light that fuels this body, the thing that gives us that connection to source, that inspiration, that ability to shine brighter. It's a vitality, really. And I think that this is just a great time, I think, to check in with how you're feeling, just how the energy levels have been. Have you been getting enough rest? What have you been fueling the body with, considering that, the sun rules Leo? I always think of Leo as like an oven. What are you putting in that oven? What are you cooking up? And literally, what are you cooking up? What creations are you, and what ways are you expressing yourself? That's, I think, Sundays are really great for that, or even exploring sun hours, doing things like maybe promotional things and stuff like that, like seeing how that resonates with you. But another, even like maybe even scheduling like doctor's appointments during like sun hours or things. I don't think a lot of doctors work on Sundays, which good for them. but for us astrologers here, we're on. But also, one thing that I like to do when working with the sun, I'm actually working with the sun today. The sun's actually forming an aspect with my Venus placement. But those are some things that I like to think about too, or like my relationships with the sun. Not just my sun placement. I mean, of course, my sun placement, what house it's in, what sign it's in. But also, what do transits feel like from the sun to each body? Like I was saying, I got one that's happening with Venus, and it's happening, in my ninth house. And my ninth house is very activated right now, and it's been actually really lovely. I've been really kind of adding more of a Venusian flair and getting more into my sort of ritualistic practices, deepening those, making them part of my everyday, which has really been very beneficial. I would say I've been doing this probably consistently over the last probably couple weeks now, just adding on different things on top of, and really, seeing how you can incorporate all this magic. Oh, I actually got one coming up after I get done with this video. But honoring the sun. So these are just some things that I would invite you to play with when you're on these sort of like planetary days, looking at if you keep track of your solar return chart. I think that's another way of working with these planetary days as well that can be very useful. But let's get into the lunar shenanigans because the sun's involved in this very personally. Well, always. But moving on the 20th of April, the moon is going to enter into Aquarius at about 4:22 p.m., and that's going to be Pacific time. Now, before we get into the last quarter phase, when we're just thinking about Aquarius in general, Traditionally, Aquarius is ruled by Saturn, and Saturn is, but this is interesting to think about that because Saturn does very well in air energy. I mean, Saturn's exalted in Libra, and I imagine Saturn can do very well in Gemini, but when you think about a Saturn in the Aquarius sort of energy, that brings vision. They're the fixed air sign, Aquarius. The fixed air sign, they're active or yang in nature. So I find really with Aquarius energy, if you can hold it in your head, you can hold it in your hand. They really do have, because Saturn will give you the discipline to get there. And not just that, they're the air signs. Aquariuses have a unique charisma about them. That's what I love. The consistent thing about most Aquarius or people with Aquarius energy that I know is that they have nothing in common. You can see commonalities in like Cancers and Taurus and, Leos and things like that, but Aquarius, they're all over the place. And that's the beautiful thing about them. And they really have a way of connecting people of all walks of life together here. And I think that's going to be something to think about. Again, like that sort of that collective mindset that Aquarius has, that they get sometimes subscribed or prescribed as the humanitarians, the ones that think about they don't like people, but they love humanity and want to elevate humanity in a sense. And I think that is a really great gift of Aquarius that we could really take into these next couple of days. Because let's go ahead and talk about the last quarter phase. This is going to be happening. I got a nice little chart for you here. I may even start including a camera back over there. That's just a personal sidebar, and now made public. But the last quarter phase. This isn't, one of those major lunations that happen, every month, where the sun and the moon, ooh, that's a big circle, but this is big emphasis. The sun and the moon are forming a square with one another. And this is different because this is like more on the waning ends of the squares. The last quarter phases it's an active energy, but very different from the initiatory one of the waxing square. The waning square, if I didn't say that the first time, the waning square of the third quarter is really about kind of releasing something, the thing that like, okay, this is what's been getting in my way. Let's get rid of this thing. And this is something I think to think about when this is happening in fixed signs. This is letting go of something that maybe has been bothered, that you've been holding on to for a long time, and that you keep seeing materialize, with that sun in Taurus. Maybe it's something that's been happening again and again and again, and it's like, you know what? If I stop giving that thing life, then it'll just stop growing. When you think about Taurus as with that sun being in Taurus, because the sun just entered into Taurus. We just got some fresh earth energy, which we've been needing after being in all of this like real heavy water, a little bit of fire, a little touch of air. So this is welcome having this here, but this is a time to really kind of be pruning the fields right now. What are the weeds that have been growing through? And with the moon being in Aquarius, thinking about the mindsets that we've been in. I don't know if I mentioned, this is happening at about 6. I have it in what do they call that? 24-hour time. So it's 18:38, but that's just 6:38 Pacific time PM. And so it's happening just a couple hours after the moon enters into Aquarius. So this could be too, again, with that moon there, thinking about any sort of like long-term things, like any sort of like prejudices or just like mindsets that we've had. You know what? I'm ready to release this. And I think even just like things that may have had a hold on you. Because really kind of fascinating, and if you've had a time to look at this chart, you probably noticed that too. Like, hey, Justin, Mars is awfully involved in this too. And you'd be right, because Mars is at the exact degree of this lunation, which is why I say this is one of those times where even though the moon transits really fast, I think paying attention to the energies, because they'll be in this aspect over, at least by whole sign, over these next couple of days until the moon moves out into Pisces, which I think it happens on like the 22nd. So I would pay attention to, because now the Mars is freshly into Leo again, going back over, still hasn't exited its retrograde shadow yet. So there still may be things that have been coming up for you. And so let's say, for example, this person here, this could apply to any Libra rising, but this chart has Libra rising here. So this could be where there are themes of coming up about your maybe your self-expression and the ways, that fifth house there you're thinking about. Maybe there's some themes about like mortality that's coming up for you with that sun in Taurus in the eighth house. Like, oh my gosh, like, for you're feeling that sense of time, like, what have I done with my life? Oh my gosh, what are my things that I want to share with the world? That kind of eighth house, fifth house combination. And what is the future of that looking like? That 11th house. How am I feeling? This could be a very galvanizing energy because you got these two opposing forces. Maybe what your future is, and the feeling is like the moon, like, can I actually accomplish this vision? And the sun is sort of like the referee point of all of these things, the grounding point. And this maybe need to be something where you make some, I would say right now, this gives me like making a small investments right now in these dreams. I wouldn't go head in on stuff. Again, like if you're thinking about like changing a career, let's say for example, I wouldn't maybe just up and quit your job because you got Saturn going through your sixth house. I would be mindful about that. But you can maybe start putting your resume out there, or maybe learning different sort of skills, different ways of expressing yourself and things like that. That can be a very sort of mundane way. That Jupiter's you're going through the ninth house there. So that would be a great time for any sort of education. In Gemini, you can learn that very quickly. A lot of resources available for you there. And that Mercury just entering into the seventh house is for going out there and talking with different people, or making different relationships, or maybe just talking with your spouse about it. Whatever that's looking like. But if you have any planets or points that are close around, especially, sure, in the cardinal placement, yeah, like we can look 3 degrees going back or forward, but I definitely would say going forward, if you have anything at about 2, 3, or 4 degrees of Aquarius, Taurus, Leo, or Scorpio. I actually got Saturn at 4 degrees 50 minutes of Aquarius. So in my midheavens in Taurus, so that actually might be something that I definitely keep an eye on. But yeah, if you got something close to those early degrees of those energies, I would pay attention to that as well. But I think that's all that I pretty much have for you on as far as the chart goes. I want to talk about the Sabian symbol though on this one, because this is another one where there were too many things lining up. I normally just focus on the lunation or the Sabian symbol of where the moon's at, but I looked at the sun and where Mars is at as well, just considering that this is happening so exact, literally to the minute. And yeah, there were some very interesting relationships or very interesting synchronicities that were there. And let's just talk about them. Because where the moon's at, this is at 1 degree 12 minutes, so you round up to 2 degrees with this. This is phase 302 of Aquarius, which speaks of an unexpected thunderstorm. And right off the kind of bat, I mean, just more so kind of like on a literal sense, if you're in an area that is prone to power outages and things, I would just make sure to just like stock up, just very kind of general, practical sort of things. Make sure you have like potable water available, that you have food preserved and things like that, just in case you got to weather some sort of storm. But the keynote for this is the need to develop the inner security which will enable us to meet unexpected crises. Because that's the thing, you can prepare for a rainy day, but you never know what that quite looks like. It's one thing to imagine what that could be, but another thing to be actually in it. It's like the rehearsal versus the performance in a sense. But I do think that there is a need to find ways to. And this really is not just on a materialistic kind of just like hoarding things and staying stocked up on stuff like that. That sort of inner sort of thing that keeps calm in the face of crises, because if everyone's panicked, then nothing is going to get accomplished. It's going to just exacerbate the storm. So there's a need, I think, especially with the moon being in Aquarius, talking about how we think about like how we deal with sort of like emergencies and things. And again, not to be in a panic sort of way, but to just get it to where it's like, so that if I stay ready, I've got to get ready, because getting ready in the middle of a crisis, it does you're playing catch up, and that's not that we're already starting off behind, and that can be tough there. Now, let's talk about where the sun's at, because the interesting thing about this, the degree that the sun is at, well, we're not at the same degree, but the Sabian symbol for the sun is an electrical storm. So you already see there's this a lot of electricity that's going on. I'd even be aware of just like I'd pay attention maybe if there's any sort of like outages, maybe that's might be something, maybe having like generators, making sure that you have like maybe battery packs, keeping things charged, whatever that might look like for you. But the keynote for that one is the cosmic power able to transform all the implications of natural existence. And there are forces that are out of our control. Even just when you think about nature, we may want it to do one thing, but this nature's going to do what it's going to do. And I know that there are technologies and things out there that are manipulating the weather, but you got to be mindful, of course. I think when you get to playing around with these sort of real kind of raw forces of nature. But I think that what the hint is getting at is where, yeah, there's a lot that's going on around us. And even just like you think about just worrying about global things, I mean, what's happening on in just universally, the cosmos are always busy, and I think that there's just a way of, you can feel so small in that, but I think it's just like, but you are a part of that change as well there. I think that there's something where, you know what, there's no sense in worrying about all those things and being overwhelmed, because then you wouldn't do anything. You kind of get stuck there for a minute. But then it's just like, but I can't control this. I can control this vessel, how I'm feeling internally, and work through that and develop that inner security, that inner strength. Because then, because again, if we don't, then it's just widespread chaos. And that's where I think Mars is coming into the mix here, because where Mars is at, it speaks of the 2 degrees of Leo. And look into these. I think I have a link for the website that has the Sabian symbols that you can look up this. And when you're doing that, so like how this is at 1 degree and 12 minutes of the zodiac signs, you'd round up to 2 degrees. That's how that works, because there's not a 0 degree in the Sabian symbol book. 0 to 0 degrees and 59 minutes is 1 degree. So just a little reference there. But the one for Mars is an epidemic of mumps. And it says the spreading power of individual crises through a collectivity. And that gives me this sense of like, that sort of like widespread fear and panic and things like that, that sort of like we have to be mindful about the energies that we put out there sometimes, and how, well, really all the time. But that's not to say that we're just like ignoring issues and things like that. But I just like, again, it was, the signs were enough for me to pause for a minute and to really think about how to talk about this, because even like the Sabian symbol or not the Sabian symbol, the general energy we're going to talk about a little bit was mentioning about warnings of, when you're seeing signs and things like that. And I would just, again, pay attention to any sort of like, any sort of signs, any sort of like omens and things like that, especially, like when you see thunder clouds coming, there's probably about to be a storm. So are we prepared for a storm? That's just something too, and whatever that may mean for us individually and collectively. But if we all individually come calm, collected, then that resonates throughout that collectively. So that's just something I invite you to entertain, as we have so much information that's getting going around. And Jupiter's still in Gemini for a little while, and yeah, just with Mars being in Leo, this galvanizing sort of energy, this is a great time to just kind of take it slow. Right now with the sun being in Taurus, I know we may want to get things moving and like be reactive, but yeah, just I think that this is the time to just kind of ease into the energies right now. So, but let's talk about that more. Let's talk about your general energy as we get into this one here, because you got hexagram 62, which is interestingly thunder over mountain. So even there's still the earth is shaking a little bit. But you got hexagram 62, which is small excess, and your changing line is line 4, which I like that this was your was the general energy for the changing line. This was like this was grounding, definitely the grounding, because definitely like my imagination was running a little wild there for a second. But let's get into, and I have a website down in the description box if you want to check out and meditate on these meetings more. I definitely invite that for you. Really brings some really, really neat insights. But line 4 speaks of no troubles, which love that. Stop excesses beforehand. Danger must be warned against. Do not take long-term actions. Now, I like that this says like it's not that there aren't just going to be any troubles, period. You know, like this is a time where if you're noticing, like I'd get any sort of like if you've been in any sort of like weird spending habits, or if you've been any sort of excesses, maybe we've been taking our health for granted, been taking anything for granted. This is the time where it's just like, hey, do you really think that this is going to, how do you think this is going to play out? You know, I think that there's just a strong question there. And I'd be mindful about like taking any sort of like just any sort of long-term investments right now. This is again to, I think, to like start small. Let's say if you're like, again, if you're thinking about changing employment, unless you got something lined up, I wouldn't suggest just completely quitting your job, or you know, like, or just make sure you have some sort of backup plan, I think, in mind for this thing here. But you know, all these energies are fresh. The moon in Aquarius, the sun in Taurus, Mars in Leo. Everything's very fresh and new, and you know, Mercury's in Aries. So it's like the mind wants to get. The mind is very active in Aries. You know, it's a lot of things maybe seeding at this time, because even Mercury was kind of tied up in that a little bit, where it was forming like an opportunity with the moon there, in some motion with Mars. So I think it just depends. Mars is still in the mix, and it's just depending on how we deal with Mars and Leo energy. I think it's something that comes up there. So I would invest in things that are, and whatever that means, whether we're talking about relationships, property, anything, like start small and build up to it. This wouldn't be, I wouldn't think about just like throwing everything in on just, you know, just because you never know with where changes are at right now. Just kind of keep an eye on yeah, just on the market. Relationships change, you know, just something, I think, to, you know, messages that I think that are coming up there. And if you see someone, one last thing, you know, like danger must be warned against. People are gonna do whatever they want to do at the end of the day. But if there's something where you see where someone's like, it's just like, hey, you may want to just like keep an eye. Like people have been talking maybe about like your work performance, or for example, or you know, like, hey, you know, this, you know, been doing a lot of like maybe gallivanting, and you know, people are starting to talk. So you know, just like things like that. I just like maybe just letting someone know, and again, let them do with that information what they will. But this, I think time, even if you're thinking about like quitting something, for example, I maybe wouldn't just go full on cold turkey. You know, like if you're working on like quitting cigarettes, for example, maybe like what are you gonna do? Because I'll tell you what, this is just an easy example because I'm familiar with it. When you quit that, one of the things that I actually didn't expect was that, like, again, that whole aspect of like there's so much time now, and it's like, oh, what do I do with this? Like this time slot was always filled with something, but now this has like been freed up. And you know, that can be a little jarring at times, like, and then you kind of like regress, or you know, like, so that's just something I think to pay attention to as we're getting into these energies here. And we're going to talk a lot about that more here in the tarot, which I don't need this pen, so good day. But couple things before we get into this. These readings that I do, they're not gender specific readings, so apply these energies to people as they make sense for your situations. And I'm also going to talk about different themes, talking about like money matters, or health, law, romance, things like that. But this is by no means more professional advice. Always talk with your financial advisors, your lawyers, your doctors, healers, things along those lines. But what I'm going to do with the tarot is I'm going to pull 6 cards, and they're going to cover different themes. And I'm going to get a clarifier for the 4th card, since that was your changing line. And so let's get into this. So let's get into the first card, which is going to talk about any sort of like short-term money matters, or things along those lines here. So let's see what's going on with the monies. And you got the 8 of Swords here. And you know, the 8 of Swords, it's interesting. I got a small bit of anxiety from that one. when I got that, like this energy of just sort of like analysis paralysis of not, the world is changing. And it's just like maybe not quite sure where to go. This is Jupiter and Gemini. We talked about this in the last with Moon and Capricorn. And so I think that there could be just a lot of things that might be keeping people stuck, and a lot of crises in the world and whatnots, and not sure what to do. And that's why I think this hexagram is talking about investing small. That mountains take time to build. Like it's not something that like a mountain just boom overnight. Wouldn't that be something? It's aggressive. But, I do, even though I think that this, like I don't think the energies are necessarily even saying where, like we're not doing anything. It's just like, again, it's small things right now. Like you don't have to go like whole in on something here. Because again, we're in a lot of fixed energy. And there may be some resistance to move right now. I think that could be hard for fixed signs, because there's this thing of once you invest in something, I think with fixed, and I have a lot of fixed energy, because it's like once you invest in something, you're kind of in it. You invest in it for the long haul, because there's a lot of stamina. There's a lot of your patience and perseverance with the fixed energy. So I think that this is one where, yeah, just looking, and maybe just even too, just looking at where we might be stuck as far as like limiting, like maybe sort of like financial things that might be. That's another energy that's coming through, thinking that you can't do something because of X, where you may not be able to make a move, for example. Maybe you can start figuring out what the process looks like. Okay, what paperwork can I get taken care of? Instead of worrying about what you don't have, and letting that stop you from doing something altogether. And this could be any sort of like investment. You can make just sort of small incremental things right now. Maybe you want to think about property, but you want to maybe look around a little bit first, see how you're feeling about areas and such. But that's something to think about there. Now let's get into the next card, which talks about any sort of like money matters or anything along those lines. Or not money matters, excuse me. Any sort of like medical matters, any sort of like health things. So I think we just got done talking about the money. Look at that, we're still stuck on the money. Oh, interesting. Lot of swords. you got the Five of Swords here. And you know what? I think that the Five of Swords, this can be this to me gives us just like a lot of thoughts that are going around right now that are maybe bringing a lot of stress maybe to the health. Maybe something that you find your just like anxiety levels that have been on, or maybe just been feeling kind of on edge. It's like literally like a tornado that's kind of rushing through there. And the interesting thing about the fives in this deck in particular, all of the fives of the minor arcanas are some sort of natural disaster. And I shouldn't say the force of nature. Let's put it like that. These are forces of nature, because that's what a tornado is. It really is kind of, despite what it can do. I mean, it's amazing what it can do. And I think that this is just here being mindful about being just kind of sucked up in the vacuum, in the noise of things, and feeling like, again, like having things that have you feel like that you can't make a move, or that you feel stuck or anything like that. Because this Eight of Swords is giving me not just like a money thing, but like we're not, like, when I think about money matters, I think about where we're spending our time as well. And I think if we spend a lot of our time in fear and not doing any sort of thing, then we're just going to stay in this defeated place, or feel like that someone's always, this is meant for someone else and not us. I think it's something or that there's not enough maybe that we can attract. There's always like a competition, always competing with someone, I think, with the Five of Swords sometimes. So yeah, just something to think about there. I think it's just like, if something is getting where it's really kind of affecting your health, it may be a time to just like pull out of a thing. Like, let's say you've been watching a lot of news, and I think that there's a way of staying abreast of what's going on without like being full on just like doom spiral. You know what I mean? So I think that's just something to think about. Now let's talk about the third card, which is going to talk about any sort of like legal matters or social affairs and things along those lines. Interesting. Yeah, wow, lot of swords. And I mean, this is appropriate. We're in a moon and air energy. So you have the Nine of Swords here, and that's what I was kind of picking up earlier. Like I was like, the Nine of Swords isn't here, but that's what kind of what I was getting. And maybe there's something where we're thinking about, like, look at this owl just stressing. Maybe you got a lot of documents that you're reviewing over. Maybe you're thinking about like maybe some property that's going on there, like where you're going to put your stuff. Maybe there's some sort of like you got to sell some things. You got to do like what are those called? Those real estate sales or whatever. I had to help. I not had to, but I helped someone with doing something like that. Or maybe you're thinking about medical things or feeling defeated there or whatever this is. Maybe just feeling a lot of just social anxieties, even, or if it's not yours, maybe you're just feeling other people's anxieties and the pressures are there, and it's like maybe you've been feeling the movement, but everyone else is kind of feeling stuck, and it's just like, what do you do with that? Like, how do you move through that? And breathe one. Breathe one, take a minute, and I'm getting like a talking with someone, of course, like obviously about this, and it might be needing to talk with like a specialist on a certain sort of deal. Maybe you're needing some sort of like marital advice, or maybe you're wanting some sort of like immigration advice or some sort of something, and then it's like maybe even, oh goodness, it's just like so many scenarios are kind of coming through there, and just looking at this library, this owl's mind is just again just feeling packed. And that might be even something too, if you've been in a lot of conversations that have been just kind of like doom, gloom, and remember how that Mars energy was talking about, that epidemic of months is something that it can either be, the energies is not like, you don't have to take this literal, but it could either be, it just talks about how energies are spread, and how just as good vibrations can spread, anxiety and things along those lines, lower vibrations can spread. And something, and I think that just is just a natural cycle of things. They always, life's always got to balance itself out or something. But yeah, there's a lot of thinking there. A lot of thinking. You might need to find, especially if you've been in a lot of space, like just finding a quiet space, maybe even just like removing yourself from like the books and things, and maybe just even just kind of looking at nature, just kind of watching the clouds do its thing or something, watch the birds fly by, just something to kind of help kind of ease the mind. Let's get into your fourth card, which talks about any sort of like marriage matters or relationship things, anything along those lines. Oh, interesting. So yeah, we're gonna talk about look at that, another five. So we got a flood here. You got the Five of Cups. And that's interesting. Again, I would, considering that you got two fives here, again, I'm getting a message of, the Five of Cups is loss. It can be where, and if it's like this is an emotional attachment to something, and this may be where maybe there's a relationship that might be splitting there. Maybe even something a little maybe a little heavier might be happening, or just kind of feeling stuck right now, not quite sure where how to fill up a space once something has been wiped away. Because that is an interesting thing when you think about natural, or just like kind of the forces of nature, when you have like fires and things, and it just leaves the land. But nature has a way of just, it always grows again. It takes time, whatever that is. And but that's easier to say when you're out of it than when you're in it. So any ways that I think that you can find yourself, because it's just, we're dealing with a lot of air, and we got some water in the mix, and nothing really to kind of, we just got in the torso. I think this is a great time to just kind of get grounded in the body right now. Do some things that can help you slow down, to be in the present moment, to kind of process what's growing, to tune into the cycles of things of you. Get your circadian rhythm going. But let's get a clarifier for this card. Let's see what's going on with this Five of Cups. I'm with it. So you got the Ace of Cups here. And the Ace of Cups there, the aces are the roots of the elements. This is the root of water, where it's almost like in Cancer. This is like the cardinal energy, the initiator of feelings. And I think that if you've had some sort of split here between, this doesn't have to be just in marriage, this could be in any sort of like relationship thing, or where maybe you've been feeling disappointed about something, or maybe there's just been a lot of anxiety to like, how can you even think about this sort of stuff with everything's going on? How can I possibly feel love, or just like some interesting energies coming in with that one. But I, I I'm getting one. I guess for both of the things that I'm thinking about, just not losing the hope about a situation that things won't get better or that things can't improve with time and improve with love. Sometimes when you have this time by yourself to just like to contemplate, then that's a great time to just pour some energy into you. Be in your vibe right now, and because when you're able to spread that love and meet yourself with that love deeply, then that spreads. Then you can spread. You give that to others, and it is like this huge rush of energy that comes through, that kind of helps cleanse all the other all the others, the grime and stuff, because that's the beautiful thing about water. It can just wash things away, but I think something's needing to maybe be felt here as you feel you're ready to give time to that, with that Ace of Swords being there, when you're ready to invest in that a little bit more, because you might be something where it's still a topic that defeats you, like still maybe keeps, that. So I'd approach that just as you're ready, but I think know that invitation, I think that's something that is just letting spirits let you know that invitation to let that space and let that healing come in is always there when you're ready. Invest in it a little bit at a time. Now let's get into your fifth card, which talks about any sort of like immediately pressing matters and things like that. Oh, all right, so you got the Ace of Wands here. And it's like the energies are giving me like a need to do something, but it's also like it's like a not sure of what. Again, it seems to just tie back to that Eight of Swords, that even that Nine of Swords energy, where something keeps getting in the way. Something keeps knocking the energies back. It's like we're rejecting the possibilities for something that could maybe make you help feel more alive again, make you feel a bit more, maybe even safer in this experience. That might even be something that's kind of coming through there. And it's like, or how can you, because that's the word I was getting to with when I was looking at the chart, was that it was giving a very galvanizing energy with Mars being there. Even though Mars is the lesser malefic, I still think that Mars, when you work, and this is someone who has day chart, so Mars does a bit more, but I do think that Mars, really teaches us just the courage and the bravery to face whatever situations that are coming our way, maybe whatever stressors that have been kind of coming through there, and maybe just kind of start small. It doesn't, the Ace of Wands is giving a lot of explosive energy even in this card, but when you think about how seeds grow, it's not a big declaration. They've had to push through the ground and all the stuff, the compost, and then boom, it sprouts up. But then life is happening. Now you're on the outside. You've gone from the safety of the earth, the womb of the earth, and now you're on the outside, and now you have to deal with the forces. You have to deal with the things that are coming, the floods, the tornadoes, and the metaphorical ones, and that that we're talking about here. So I'm even just getting something with just like seismic activity, and it just makes me think about just like how the earth is just always shifting and always doing things. It may seem like it's still, but we all know that the earth is busy. Now let's get to your last card here, which talks about the consequences, or it's more so the destiny or the karma of the situation. Let's see what's going on there. Nice. Interesting. So you got the Strength card here. And the strength card is that inner strength, that we were talking about with honestly this whole read, but especially during that transits, like the Sabian symbol for this, the need to develop that inner security. That's the strength card here. To be able to be calm in the face of adversity, in the face of challenges. And it's not to say that you don't take time to process stuff as they come up. Five of Cups, of course, you got to process these things. But I think that there's something here that, in the moment, it's like, there's like a rising to the occasion sort of thing. It's like we have to put this aside for a minute. That moon in Aquarius where it's like, like I got to channel these emotions in a different way. This water's flowing through. So, how do we clear this out here? How do we, find our strength? So, and that's ultimately too what's I'm just looking at this lion, like how when the next thing comes, you just after a while you just start to get familiar with the signs when this lion's just kind of looking like, oh, are the clouds coming through? Is it that time already? Spirit, I thought we were done. Spirit, you tell me I got to get up out my hammock and do something again. All right, let me change. So I think that it just helps to develop even a playfulness with the situations. But I think again that just comes with time. Speaking of time, let's get some advice from Saturn. All right. So you get the Nine of Wands here, and let's go ahead and switch over. Because this Nine of Wands, sometimes I think the Nine of Wands you can be on the defensive all the time, just expecting something to happen and not really make a move. But, thinking that you're protecting something, but really nothing's happening. And I think that there's one energy that's coming through of just finding ways to not be, stuck in something. Like it's just like to not to allow the kind of external chaos to beat and batter you. So it's not to say that things aren't going to be difficult sometimes. But I think that there are small ways and little things that we can take to do every day that can prepare us for the bigger things that happen. You know what? I'm just being reminded. There was, I pull a couple of tarot cards each day just to get a general idea of how I can further this great work that I'm doing. And there was a period of time where I was getting just sort of like a lot of like a couple of towers that were and they were really casually kind of coming through, just like there's a tower, oh, there's another tower for you. And, I looked at it and it's like, okay. And then when the tower moment happens, when the realization kind of happens, the foundation's changing. It's like, yeah, it's not great, but I was able to pause in it where it's just like, you know what? I can make this tower I can make this whole image actually happen, or I can wait a minute. I can wait a minute and know that I'm going to have to deal with this thing, but let me see how the landscape is changing first. Because if I'm going to make a move while the earth is still shaking, that's not going to do anything. But I got, sometimes you got to get grounded, figure out what you're going, and it's just like, okay, here's that opportunity here. So that's kind of what this Nine of Wands is giving me. You get prepared when you see the omens, when the things are there, pay attention to them. Okay, have a game plan. If you need to have this conversation or need to make this move, what does that look like? And then if you're not prepared, then let the anxieties and things fuel you to get ready, to talk to people, to get some ideas so that you're not feeling as defeated in this situation there. So that's just something that so that's what Saturn does. Saturn shows you where you need improvements, and then you improve those things, and then Saturn celebrates. It'll never show it. You won't see this from Saturn, but there's an acknowledgement when you get little things. I actually got a last little story. I got a little email about saying that I've been working on my finances and getting through things together because Saturn's going through my 8th house. And Saturn sent me a little wink today, and it was just like, hey, you've been doing this for a year, and you're that much closer, and then we got this good news thing for you here. I'm just like, well, look at that. I'm sitting there doing this. So, and it all started with little steps, and this is something where, so just something I think to think about. I don't think there doesn't have to be troubles if there doesn't need to be, but I don't think that doesn't mean not making a move. Just like, it's just saying like right now, let's just do like short term. Let's see short term right now. What is that sort of stuff? Let's not be inundated by the long term, even though that's Saturn's things. But it's like, what am I doing presently to make those bigger things happen? You know what I mean? So, all right, yeah, that's all I got for you. I told you I got a lot of thoughts to share with you. But if you like that, if anything resonated with you, give it a thumbs up. And share this if you know somebody who can get some nuggets of wisdom from this. And then subscribe there, you strength, you strong one, you. Hit that bell button to get notified on all these videos each day. And then I'll get you surprise cards here. But if you want to know what's going on with these celestial bodies and just kind of want to see what transits and how to work with them more, approach them in a practical way, then there's a link for my other channel, Alchemist 8. I release videos every Mercury day. That's on a Wednesday. And go over the transits and all those good things for you. You can just kind of get an idea of what houses is going through for you, and just like, to be forewarned is to be forearmed. And who doesn't want to be that? Oh, nice. And then I'm also doing this little series where I talk about different celestial bodies and different signs and different houses, and I got them all in different playlists. And actually, I'm gonna be talking about Mars, and Mars in a very strong place. So I'm actually really excited to talk about that one. But that's all I got for you. So let's go ahead and get into your surprise card. And I like that. That's interesting. So you have the Protect card here. Now, this to me is, again, protecting any sort of, I would, again, look into any sort of investments that you have right now. Think about any sort of future investments and making sure that you're protecting your, anything that you're needing to do. Like whatever that might look like for you. How's your health doing? Things along those lines. How the energy levels are. I'm just looking at this star here, this pentagram. That's fives are related to Mars, Gavura, and so that's just another thing. I think there's something to pay attention to in this transit. Pay attention to this Mars in this, but I also think too that we got a heads up with this. So you got a very spiritual heads up. I think that, and that's when you talk about like kind of like divine protection, it's those omens, it's those signs, like it doesn't, most of the time rain doesn't just like fall out of the sky, like it's usually there's some sort of warning sign with it, or that, certain things where you can guess when a tornado's coming, or when there's going to be flooding, or when there's going to be fires, when the conditions are right for these things to happen. That's divine protection. If I'm, this is just something that I'm just kind of thinking about as I'm processing this. That can be a form of what that looks like. So, and when you move like you're protected, because you are, it's because when we start, it's seeing the signs, it's seeing the patterns in things. And when you do, you just, again, when you stay ready, you don't gotta get ready. And that's a place, and it's not, and I say that from a not stressful place, as I deliver that. It's like little things that you can do where it's just like, okay, I got food, I got water, I got this, okay, dope. And so I think about it, looks like my stock's getting low. I've been going through these things for a little bit. Let me go ahead and stock that back up. That's what I was doing. I made a little mental note there. So it's like little things like that, that just get you thinking. So, yeah. I think that's all I got for you there. I won't talk your head off. I mean, I already kind of did. But until next time, stay mindful out there. Keep eyes on that moon. When am I going to see you again? Let me make sure to get that pulled up. Oh, how funny. And I will catch you keep this Mars theme going. On the next one, Mars is the tower, by the way. Mars Day.